Okay, welcome to the class on wells and city water. First thing we'll talk about are wells. Wells are private systems, typically, unless you're in a condo or some kind of community where they all share well water. But typically it's a private system. There are multiple different types of wells. Anybody want to tell me what those are?
Drilled and shallow.
Drilled and shallow. Funny you should say those two. What's a dug well?
The homemade one.
No, it's a shallow one. What's a point well, a driven well?
Shallow.
It's shallow. So those are, I look at this as these are the two types. One of them is taking the water from less than 30 foot away. Why the 30-foot boundary?
As far as the pump will pull it?
A brand new, efficient, ready to go pump will only pull 30 foot. So if you walk into the basement and you see a pump and a tank in the basement, that pump, you got the water running upstairs like I know you guys do, running water the whole inspection, right? You got the water running upstairs and that pump's just pumping away in the basement, you know you have a shallow well. Because if it's not a shallow well, what is it?
Or drill well,
Drilled well. And if it's a drilled well, what does it have?
submersible pump,
And if it has a submersible pump, what else does it have?
pressure tank.
Well, they all both have pressure tanks. What is it that is the issue with drilled wells? We'll get back to shallow wells, but since we're here, we're going to talk about a drilled well with a pump down here, a wellhead here, and of course, a very nice house here. Okay? Here's the basement, and here's the pump equipment, there's the pressure tank, and here's the lines going out, and those lines go all the way down to the submersible pump. Now, what's the issue here?
You can't check it.
Can't check it. There is a way of checking it. You know what it is? Run the water. That gets it to the top. That's correct. And now we're getting into water quality. The issue with drilled wells is like any other thing. We do want to have running water. Running water tells us if we have city water, it's working. If we have a shallow well, that we're pulling water from a shallow well, and if we turn it on and it's pumping, that my submersible pump is working. And other than that, all I'm looking at is the condition of the well equipment in the basement. I got running water, condition of the stuff is working fine. I listen to my pressure tank, which we'll talk in a second. But what my main concern when it comes to wells is the condition of this lining. How do I know if the lining's bad? Water quality. I'm going to take a sample of the water because there's never 99.5% of all your well inspections that have a well. The mortgage company is going to ask for a sample looking for bacteria. It's a $35 test. I charge $100. I'm running water for the well flow test, but I'm taking a sample. If that sample comes back with bacteria, William, what's it tell me? No, I'm not
Yeah,
screwed.
well-
I just paid for my trip. I know, I've just made my call worth it to my client. I love finding that problem. Because I'm the only person around that I know of, inspectors, that's going to tell these people that bacteria in the water, now listen sharply here, this is important because nobody else does it. Bacteria in the water means what?
Casing's cracked.
Huh?
The casing's cracked.
Casing's cracked. There's a mechanical problem here. That's a sealed system. When the well driller sealed it up and put it in there and signed it over and got his check and walked away, it was a sealed system. The only way that there's bacteria in that water is if something's wrong. Now, realtors will tell your client, what do you have to do? Oh, bacteria in the water, no problem. We're just going to
Chlorinate.
shock the well. Does that solve the crack liner?
No.
Does that take care of the gasket? Guess what realtors don't do? Tell the people they have a mechanical problem, isn't that correct? If it is bacteria in the water, have you heard that? Oh, all you have to do is shock the well?
That's true.
Now, if it's a shallow well, that'd be absolutely accurate. We can't protect shallow water
Right.
from bacteria. And so if it's bad bacteria, a lot of bacteria, and they count the colonies, then what they do is they put these RV filters, and the water comes in, goes through an RV filter and bang through the house, and everybody's happy. Shallow wells can be protected because they're always going to have bacteria. But the moment your drilled well is there, that doesn't mean it's time to shock. That means it's time to call in a well guy and find out how much it's going to cost. It may be a $100 call because they've got a gasket up here that is old and cracked and bugs are getting in. And that's all the bacteria is. Or they could have a cracked liner and it could be a $3,000 job. And since that's why we're there, to find mechanical problems, the most important thing you're going to do when looking at a well is make sure the system is operating properly and make sure the bacteria is okay. Because that bacteria count is going to tell you whether that liner's cracked or if it's still a sealed system.
So there shouldn't be any bacteria in the seal system?
It started off that way. Shouldn't be any bacteria in a submersible pump drilled well. Yes?
Is it automatic that you find out they have a drilled well, and then you say, well, you have to do a water test?
No, I don't tell them that. It's in the contract. I recommend it to my client. Oh, yeah, there's a well system here. Am I doing a well flow test and a water quality test? And 95% of the time, yes. And 5 or 10% of the time, the answer is no. No, my cousin lived here, and I'm sure it's fine. They're all well. They're all good. There's no problem. Well, can somebody explain to me why bacteria in the water and people are living there without any problems? Can somebody explain why they're not dead?
Not all there.
Pardon?
They have strong immune system.
Or their immune system got accustomed to it. Like when you go to Mexico, you get sick and they're not sick. Bad water with bacteria in it doesn't kill you, it just makes you sick. I mean, it kills you in some cases, depends on the type. E. coli will kill infants and babies and elderly, etc. But E. coli typically just makes people sick, but it's the most deadly of all the bacteria. And that's what the water test is going to do. It's going to tell you whether you have E. coli, it's going to tell you whether you have other bacteria, and it's also going to tell you in what amount. They take at the laboratory, they take a plate like that, and somehow they spread water all over it, then they let it incubate for a few days. And if it has bacteria, it starts cooking up on these spots. And I've seen them sit there, and they're literally counting colonies. And if they did this test, and they only come away with 2 or 3 colonies, or growths, then that's probably bacteria that you picked up by putting your finger in the water, or there was some spaghetti sauce on the inside of the faucet. Something that was just transmitted accidentally. Or maybe just the beginning of a crack in a gasket. But sometimes there's 50 or 60, and the highest the number goes is 100. So when you get your water quality test back from the laboratory, the most important thing that you're looking for is this number between 1 and 100. 100 means you have problems. You have bad water, and you probably have a larger problem like a cracked liner. 0 means it's clean. 1 or 2 means you were sloppy. Or there's just maybe a gasket and just some bug shit gets in there occasionally, but not all the time.
I just had a water quality test done, and the report came back and said negative. Does that mean that they
Negative means it's good. There was no bacteria.
They didn't have enough to put
And
on
they
it.
should have followed that sentence with water is of a satisfactory drinking condition.
Yeah, they said that.
Right. If it had said positive, the water, and then they would have said if it is coli, or they would have said what else it was. But they always separate the E. coli reading, because the E. coli is considered the most deadly, which is fecal matter. Okay? And it could be rat fecal matter, it doesn't matter.
Runoff for the farmer's field, fertilizer.
Right, or too close to your septic system. I went to a house one day, just a couple months ago, and literally the wellhead was about 10 foot away from the septic tank. And I don't know whether they measure that or not, because the leach field went off that way and the wellhead was over here. But I did hear about 2 weeks later that the whole deal fell through because they didn't want to move the septic field, or the leach field. More about leach fields later. Yes?
Would you still do the same sampling for a shallow well as a drilled deep well?
Absolutely. I want to know the extent. And I have to come up with a number so I can recommend to my client, tell him what's going on. He's asking for the test, and I'm going to recommend a test. But it coming back with bacteria in it's not a big deal if it's a shallow well, because nobody expects an unsealed system to be bacteria-free. Because rainwater, with the definition of an unsealed system, is rainwater is getting into that water. And rainwater, now if you're talking about a spring or something like that, I've seen perfectly clean spring systems that are, out of the rocks, etc. That's no bacteria whatsoever because it's fast moving. But typically you'll go outside and the old farmer will lift up this big plank and you look down about 4 foot and there's hoses sticking into the water and it's just a hole in the ground that's sealed with a wooden, so there's dead bodies in there floating around. It could be almost anything. And then that hose goes inside and then the pump's inside and working away getting the water inside. So yes, I'm testing anything.
And they just drink that?
Well, as long as their immune system's okay and they've been used to it, and, yeah, but it can make you sick.
That's disgusting. You say, boy, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Put mine to a pump, boil it, something. Let's filter that water. Give me a bottle.
Unfortunately, 80% of the world lives in that condition.
Really? We need to build more cities.
No, that's,
That's what we need.
no.
Build more cities. More
Yeah, that's what we need, more
More
cities.
filters, yes.
More cities, more filters, more municipal water systems. That's what you really meant, right?
Yeah.
Okay. More cities. Oh, boy, you are a city boy. So when you go into the house, how many of you were there when we went to my dream house for the mock inspection? God, wasn't that basement wonderful? Oh my God, we did a whole well thing right there in front of it, and it had its tank there. When you're looking at the system, your water's coming in here. There's a control box. There's a gauge. And then there's a pressure tank. And this is your water in, and here's your water out. So this is to the well, and here's your submersible pump. Here's your pressure tank control box, which has a switch in it and a pressure gauge. Have we done anything with how to do a well flow test yet? We did, okay. When you're doing your well flow test, and when you're looking at this system, what you have the water going at 3 gallons per minute upstairs, so there should be water flowing in the house, just 3 gallons per minute. Now at 3 gallons per minute, the standard, not always the case, but the standard result should be 1 minute between clicks. And the click is turning the pump on and then filling this tank up. And then the click stops the pump from going, and then this bladder up here is pressed up there until this pressure gets really high over here. And then once that gets so that the click forces the pump off, and then this bladder pushes the water out. So out here at the faucet, pretty good, huh? Wait a minute, I can do a teardrop for water. Okay, there's the water. Come on, now that's good. This water is going to be a steady stream, but this is only working half of the time. The other half of the time, this is working. And what you want to do as a home inspector is you're going to look at the condition. Is there rust? Is there cracked or broken hoses? Is it leaking? Get a general idea of the condition, and then time the clicks. So when you're doing your inspection, you literally, if you have a watch, look at it, or you're sitting there counting to 60 like I do. I hear a click, and I stand there looking at it. Sometimes your client walks down and wonders why you're staring at the, like it's like you're thinking about something else. And I'm really just waiting for that other click. So, don't let him interrupt you, but count to 60. The clicks should, in a normal condition, be about a minute apart. If it's clicking, and then 10 seconds later it's clicking back, and then 10 seconds later it's clicking back, that's called short cycling, and that's because this tank is waterlogged. Too much water in it, and it's just not working right. So a properly working system should be about a minute between the pump going on and the pump going off. Now, you don't know which click is which, except by the meter. Now, sometimes that meter is broken, the gauge, and so now it's frozen in the spot. So you have a perfectly working system. This switch is still responding, but these dials on the gauge are frozen, so you don't see it going up and down. But on the system operating properly, it'll hit 40, and then you'll hear a click, and then it starts working its way down. And about a minute later, it'll hit 20, and then you'll hear a click, and it starts working its way back up. It's working properly. If it's anything else other than about a minute, then it's cause for concern. Now, there are some balanced systems, and I had it happen to me one day. It only happened once, but it's out there. And I talked to the well guy, and he said, yeah, this is rare, but it does happen. This is pushing water out at 4 gallons per minute. It's coming in here at 4 gallons per minute, and it's going. So the pressure never, and it's going out here at 4 gallons per minute. So they're supplying and taking out at exactly the same rate. So this never changes. That means this clicks and never comes back. So when you're running water, you're always running it from the well. When you run water, you're always running it from the well if it's not clicking. That's not the way the system was designed. I called out the well guy, and he says, well, this is one of those unusual systems that it's totally balanced. That when you turn on the water, the pump acts down in the submersible pump acts exactly like a shallow well pump. It's always on when you're running water, it's always off when you're not.
So then that's more of an expansion tank than that is a lateral tank.
Yes. Now, what is the purpose of the bladder, or no, of having it cycle 1 minute on and 1 minute off? What are they doing? Why have this system? Why not just have a submersible pump pumping water through the house? Why involve the tank? No idea?
Extend the life of the pump.
Oh, God. That's such a good idea. He doesn't know whether I'm serious or not. No, that's not right.
Regulate the pressure? Regulate the pressure in the house so the tank is, or your water's pressure is always between, let's say, 40 and 60 psi. But the pump,
you
could be like
just have
100 psi?
There's probably other ways than putting an air bladder in between the process of just regulating. Turn it on and turn it on until I got my pressure and then leave it at that. It could just be a nozzle that as I turn the nozzle, it gets more and more. And when I hit 40, I stop there.
What's your run through fixtures?
So what's the reason? What's the reason we have a tank? I know you know.
Yeah, because I was down there with you when you told it.
And you remember?
Kind
Kinda? Tell me.
money.
Money. Tell me how this, having that tank saves money.
It'll be on less. Simple.
Electricity costs money. This whole system was designed because if it's on for, let's say, 3 hours a day, that's 1.5 hours of electricity. Yeah, 3 hours and 1.5, that's 1.5 is half 3, right? If it's on for 3 hours, I'm running water for a total of 3 hours of the day, I'm only using an hour and a half of electricity. That's the money we're saving. It's not to save the life of those pumps, I'm told, that's the last reason, those pumps will go forever. The shallow well pumps are 30 years old that you see in the houses. They're always old suckers because most everybody tries to go to drilled wells these days. Those pumps last forever. So that's what I thought too for the first 10 years until I talked with somebody that says, hey, it's about the electricity. And that made sense. So you're going to stand there and you're going to listen to it click. If the clicks are 10 seconds apart, you're short cycling. That probably means there's a waterlogged tank. But do we care what the problem is? Don't get suckered into the conversation about what do you think it is. I don't know. This isn't operating the way it's supposed to be. I always tell them it could be one thing. Well, it could be just a bladder that the tank just needs some more air in it. Or there could be something wrong with the pump. Don't set them up for one or the other. Give them the cheap option and the expensive option and say it could be either one. They will only hear what they want to hear. Okay, they're hoping for the expensive option so that they can get their major, so that they can get the concession on the price, and they'll get a lower mortgage. Okay? Let's talk about shallow wells. We've already talked about they probably have bacteria. Shallow wells have water within 30 foot, and that now this pump is sitting right here. It has different configuration. It has a one hose coming in and one hose going out. That's a standard traditional pump. If there are two hoses going out, now we have one hose going in and two hoses going out into this system. Two hose system is the intermediate solution to drilled wells without a submersible pump. Because now this two hose system is pushing and pulling. Now it's pushing water down here that then pushes it back up, just like the buried oil tank. You know, to get the oil up, there's a pump that pushes it out and pushes it back. So when you see a two-hosed shallow pump, shallow well pump, that means it could be further than 30 foot away. That was used before they came up with a submersible pump. Okay? Shallow well pumps always have bacteria. Is it working? What condition? And you're off. Shallow well pump with two hoses, it could be any kind. I don't know that it's drilled or it's not drilled. My water test will tell me all I need to know. It could be a shallow well that's just 100 foot away instead of 30 foot away. It's still not sealed. Or it could be 100 foot down and it's perfectly clean water, and they're just using two hoses. But remember, in this configuration where you have two hoses, it's not a sealed, there's not a liner. It's just a drilled well that may be much deeper. There's still going to be the opportunity for bacteria. But in the end, it's either pumping water or it's not. Isn't our main thing to do when we go do an inspection is to identify the type of system it is, explain it to how that client works, and is it working right or not? That's the end of the day. If I go out there and I have the well that's down there and is clicking every minute, and the water is pumping, I'm done. I tell them, hey, the system looks new, it's within 5 years old. That's pretty simple. And all I did was run water and I counted seconds, we're done. But when it's a problem, then you have to do a little explanation. If it's short cycling, or if you're doing a well flow test and it runs out. If you're doing a well flow test and it runs out and it's a shallow well, what do you think the reason is for it running out? Well's dried up. Shallow wells typically, when you're doing a shallow well test, you're doing a well flow test, I would say half of the time I do a well flow test on a shallow well, they don't make it 3 gallons per minute for an hour. Now, I have a drilled well, and I'm running my well flow test, and my system's working fine, and 45 minutes into this, it now starts going dry, and I'm starting to get mud in the bathtub, and there's now just a trickle. And so I show my realtor, I show my client, and I take a picture of the mud in the bottom of the tub, and I turn it off. What does that mean? Did the pump fail?
No,
What's it mean?
means the well's dry.
Is that bad?
Yes, depending on, you know, depending on what you need for your house,
Yeah, but does that mean they need a new well?
not necessarily.
Not necessarily. When it goes dry, there are remedies of, what do the well guys do? They blow it out the system, they'll take a hose and they'll take a high pressure, they'll take a high pressure hose and blow it, and this pipe that's going down, that's the well, has little perforated holes in the side, and they get filled with mud. And so it produces less water, the recovery time is less. And so you can actually, if it hasn't recovered, the people took showers the morning before you came to do your inspection, now the tank's empty. They may just come out and blow the pipes free, and now it recovers back and it's fine and there's no problem. Or it may need a new well. I've gone on to many properties and there's the old well over here and here's the new well. Wells do go bad. The aquifer does move around. And just because a well was good one day doesn't mean it's good 10 years later. Okay, a house being built 2 blocks away could change. I've seen a house change from perfectly dry basement, the next door neighbor put in a pool, and now his basement is a swimming pool itself. He actually has planks walking to, he's got 2 sump pumps going all the time, and he's got planks so he can walk around in his basement, walking over the water. We did a mock inspection of that house. I couldn't believe it. And just that year, a new pool went in next door. So anything going on under the surface will change the aquifer. So wells can be good, and they can go bad. It may need to be re-drilled someplace, or it may need to be blown out. So when you have a well flow test and you're checking the well, if it goes dry, it's not the end of the world, but it may be. So don't come down one way or the other. We don't know, let's get a qualified expert out here. He'll take a look, he'll test this well, he'll tell us what the story is. Okay?
I have a quick question.
Yes.
Has someone ever asked you to come back and do like just another well flow test, like let's say 24 hours later? Or, you know, like you did it and it failed, and then they use the example of, oh, well, you know, the 3 kids showered before the, you know, the inspection.
I got a story for that, but I'm told I tell too many stories. I don't care. I went out to a house, and I'm sorry, I have to be mean to a realtor here, okay? Okay. He sometimes gets defensive. I went out to the house, and this young couple was buying it, and there was even a younger real estate agent and an older real estate agent there. And the younger real estate agent was representing his sister as the buyer's agent. And the older real estate agent was the senior real estate agent in the same office. And the contract was written at 1 gallon per minute for the well flow test. Well, shit, I can piss 1 gallon per minute. It doesn't take much of a well to do that. So I got ready to start the well flow test, and the older realtor goes over and says, remember, it's just 1 gallon per minute. I said, what do you mean 1 gallon per minute? He said, the contract says 1 gallon per minute. and I did something I normally don't do. Oh, I got in an argument. Oh, wow, what a surprise. I did something I normally wouldn't have done today. I thought my behavior, looking back at it, I would have probably done a little bit differently, not much, but a little bit. I said, I'm sorry, I'm here to protect my client. I'm gonna run at 3 gallons per minute for an hour, because that's the EPA, FHA standard. I don't care what your contract says. EPA, 3 gallons per minute for a house this size. I'm gonna run that. She says, you can't. The contract says no. Well, let's see. I said, let's see. I'll come back tomorrow free of charge, and I'll run your 1 gallon per minute. So we agreed on that. She was not a happy camper. 20 minutes into the 3 gallons per minute, it came up. And then she started yelling at me. So I was upset because here the brother, who obviously didn't know anything, was defending the whole deal and arguing with me also, and it was his sister buying the house. That's what bothered me more than anything else. So I came back out, I turned on Rush Limbaugh really loud, I got my cigar out, I lit the cigar. She would not let me run it inside, but now it was okay because yesterday I did it inside. So the 3 of us sat outside with Rush Limbaugh blaring on my Jeep. I had turned the water on. I had it going at 3 gallons per minute, and she stood, 1 gallon per minute, and she stood over it almost the whole time. And I'm leaning against my truck, smoking the cigar, and I keep walking over about every 10 minutes and checking, and it's still at the 1 gallon per minute level. I have a bucket that has the 5 gallons, and it's got the 1 gallon and the 3 gallon. And so I was timing the 1 gallon per minute. And what do you know? But the thing ran dry at 55 minutes at 1 gallon per minute. She was not a happy camper. Anyway, I couldn't believe the brother had thrown in with this. I think he was so naive, he didn't know what he was doing. He was just going along to keep his job or whatever. But anyway, the moral of the story is I was wrong. And what was I wrong about?
Arguing because they wanted.
It was written in the contract. I should have just done what the contract said. In the end, I'm also a part of the contract. I'm a legal part of that deal. If that contract says 1 gallon per minute, I should have run it at 1 gallon per minute. But I was so irate that the brother was not protecting his sister and bothered me. So the contract says 1 gallon per minute. The contract says do the radon in the attic. The contract says this or that. I have to put I'm a function of that contract. And if those people signed that contract, I don't have a leg to stand on. They're asking for a test to be done at 1 contract per minute. My argument with the real estate agent or real estate industry is they tell the client that this is the standard contract, and that's bullshit. That's the standard contract for that real estate office. Anything can be put in that contract that you want or taken out that you want. There's no such thing in the industry as a standard contract. Correct?
Correct.
So my client unwittingly, because she's got 2 kids, and now I'm going to get on my soapbox, she's got 2 kids, she just had a husband who left her, she's worried about her job, and she's buying a new house because she can't rent anymore. And now the real estate agent says, well, she knows what she signed. That's bullshit. I'm sorry, that's just absolute bullshit. I should be protecting my client, but I have to go by the contract. Today I would have done the 1 gallon per minute, and I would have shut up, and then I would have walked my client out to the car, and then I would have told them that that's bullshit. I did what I was supposed to do, but it shouldn't have been a 1 gallon per minute. Is that about right?
That's right.
I should have followed the contract. I know that.
Yeah, what the real estate company or agents did was unethical, but you have to follow whatever's written there. And it's up to the attorneys to
That's absolutely right.
hash out the legal.
What I should have done was walk out to the car, explain to them that that isn't the standard.
Right.
That is not the standard in this area.
Right.
Can you please give me the name of your attorney, and I'd like to call and explain that to him. That's the way I should have approached it. I still have an obligation to protect my client, no question about it. But I also have an obligation to follow the contract.
So do you get a copy of that contract?
No.
So.
And I don't really want one, because I go in, I knew that was a problem when they wouldn't let me follow what I consider the standard process. When they don't let me do the standard process, then it comes up as an issue. I don't need to see a contract because I do all the things that for 20 years home inspectors have found are non-invasive ways to check a house. And I'm very comfortable that we don't know everything about the house, but we know a lot about the house. And when they stop me from doing any one portion of it, my old antenna raised up and said, well, I wonder why that is. I wonder why the contract says this or that. What do you mean you don't want to do radon in the lowest level before? You want to do it on the first floor? You know, then it starts raising questions because they'll change that contract. Some realtors will change the contract to read in a manner, put in things in a manner so that the house will pass and they'll get their commission. Not all, but some. But we don't know who's who. So we have to, I treat them all like I expect trouble. And then the ones that prove themselves, then I'm all over them. I think they're great.
So what happens if down the road, somebody gets cancer or something like that, they come back and they find out there is radon in the basement, you did the test, if you don't have a copy of that contract, that you were filing the contract, how do you defend yourself?
I provided them a radon test at the time, and if I didn't provide them a radon test at the time, they'd have to prove that they asked me to give them a radon test. I am a function of the contract. If they ask for a radon test, if they ask for a well flow test, if they ask for a termite test, I do those things. If they don't ask for them, and I don't do it, then now they'd have to prove that, oh, we told Dan to do a radon test, he just didn't do it and we didn't care.
But if they tell you, do the radon test in the attic, and you know that's wrong. Now I know, I learned my lesson. Not that I got in any trouble on that, I didn't get any trouble on it, but I'm trying to keep a broader perspective. I now know that I should have gone strictly by the contract. And strictly by the contract, and then had a private conversation with my client. Because as far as I'm concerned, one of the reasons the problem is if I do it their way and the attorney's period has already expired, then they have no way out. So now I'm forced to find them a $1,500 issue. If I have a $1,500 issue in it, I don't care. So that's one of my arguments for doing it before the attorney expiration period. But I just recently found out that if the attorney expiration period isn't over, that a house can still be sold right out from underneath them. So they've gone through their $1,000 for the home inspection and the appraisal, and the day before the end of the period, they wound up selling on a cash deal to somebody else for more money. And these people are shit out of luck. So I understand why realtors want to wait until the period's over. I used to think it was scummy to wait until the period was over. Now I know why. So I've learned.
Right. Especially in a market like this, before it used to be 5 to 7 day attorney period, now it's 3.
I just had that.
Rifle it through.
And if you could get it at 1, you should. But I just had that happen to me, a client the other day. I was, in the morning, I was driving to the inspection. She called me up and said they sold it to somebody else. Yeah. And then I looked into the deal. A realtor friend of mine looked it up and found out that it was still on the market. The attorney period wasn't closing till Friday, and this was on a Thursday. And they sold it for cash. They sold it, it was a cash deal, I forget, there was other things about it, but it was a cash deal and he wanted the money now.
I have a quick question about your example. So you pulled me aside after you did the well test or a radon test that wasn't, in accordance with the standard.
You're using yourself as an example of my client.
Yes, and I am writing my check for $400 or $500 or whatever it is.
It's never enough.
Well, and then you tell me that the well test that you just did, or the radon test that you just did, isn't to standard. And then as a client, or as the client, would you go back and do that for free, or would you then be like, oh?
I always go back and do it for free. That's just good public policy. That's just good. I'd never charge anybody to go back. I don't care if I'm going back 3 times.
Now, I guess theoretically, why
would I wait?
Yes.
I probably wouldn't.
Okay.
If I have an opportunity to tell you this is bullshit, and you're being weaseled here, I'm going to do it, but you need to call your attorney, then I'm going to have that conversation. Okay. I probably wouldn't wait until we're out the door, but I'm also going to have it outside of the earshot of the realtors, because I don't want them thinking I'm pissing in their pool. Okay?
Would you cover your ass in your report saying, I only
In a
did one,
non-standard manner, I did this
Yeah.
test
1 gallon per request
of the contract, whereas the standard is, I'm making it obvious and it'll be a comment. And the nice thing about home inspection reports, as long as it's not a defect, I can say anything I want in my comment section. So I'm gonna say that the standard is, and the contract read this way, but for, to better protect, I would request that they did another well flow test.
So they can't come back on you saying,
Nope.
you put radon in the attic, and what the hell were you thinking?
You know, yeah, what the hell were you thinking? Yes, why were you doing it there?
You would also make a note on the actual radon form when you submit the canister.
Oh, it asked you, where in the house did you do it?
Because you don't wanna falsify anything there, you
No.
wanna state exactly how you did it. and-
Right.
But they're not gonna get something and say like, oh, we can't do this.
No, they are
They're still
going to
gonna-
do it, they're
they're still
still
gonna
going to do it because I've done radon on the third floor. Anybody can give me an example of why I'm doing it on the third floor?
They want it there?
Apartment, condo. Lowest level before on that apartment, radon was in the contract. They asked me for radon, I said, are you really kidding me? It was in Saratoga. Put it in one of the bedrooms and let it go. It blew 2.5. I'm going, holy shit, I don't want to be in the basement. Per floor, it drops in half. If I got the third floor up here, here's the basement, first floor, second floor, basement, 1, 2, 3. 2.5, right? 5, 10, 20. And I've tested this with the unit on different floors, and it comes out within 10% every time. I think there's many variables there, but I've tested it about 3 different times. So when you're at a floor and you get a 20, you can expect 10 here, you can expect 5 there, and you expect 2.5 there. Okay, water purity test. Jamie went over some water purity, correct? And any questions on water purity? No reason to, it's only been a week, you probably haven't forgot it all.
Do you guys know where to go?
Huh?
Do they know where to go?
Yes. He gave us form.
The basic test is a bacteria test, and then the more than basic test is FHA. This costs you 35 bucks. This costs you 105, something like that. 110, 105. A lot of home inspectors won't even do a bacteria. If it's not city water, no, if it's anywhere in the country at all, they will only do a 200, and they sell the idea of doing the 200 FHA. It means he charges 200, and because there you don't know what's going on in the countryside. You don't know where all the old leach fields were. You don't know anything that's going on.
Phosphates, nitrates from the fertilizers and stuff.
There's fertilizers. There's all sorts of stuff.
Did they tell you about if you're gonna do a long form, that you can't drop it off on a Friday night?
Yeah.
Why is that?
When did that happen?
Nitrates have to be tested within 24 hours.
Yeah, but they tested it Saturday morning.
No. If you, they
Bender Lab
Bender Lab.
has stopped testing on
Yeah.
Saturday mornings.
So if you collect the samples on a Friday and drop them off, they're not gonna be,
That's why I left my last water laboratories. They didn't test on the weekends.
yeah.
You know, you sure? I can't believe.
I
John
was told I
Mustin-
can't drop off long form FHA because they do, okay, so let me back up.
They'll do the short one because they can do the bacteria the next morning.
The next morning, because they do a group testing, so they get a group of samples all together.
So it's only the long that they don't sample the night before, and that's because of one of the elements on it, the phosphate or something.
Yeah, so dealing with the nitrates,
The nitrates.
they'll wait for Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday. So if you have to do a long form, what people typically do, if you have to do a test on a house, set up your radon and then grab the samples when you pick up your
I've
radon.
done that many a time.
So it'd be like a Sunday night.
That was back before I went to Bender Lab. If I did a Saturday inspection or a Friday inspection,
Yeah.
I'd
I then pick up take the water sample when I did my
We
radon.
got radon.
Then I got Bender Laboratory, and they were testing everything all the time, but
Yeah,
no more.
they've been, what they told me a couple weeks ago, and I heard from other people, is that for the nitrates, they do all group testing, and they
Right,
usually do.
no,
it group
I got
testing.
that. So water purity test, get down to the Bender Laboratory, get some sample bottles, and learn how to do this.
John Wilson is the guy you wanna contact.
Or
Really
the
good guy.
supervisor of the department, John Wilson. And he's great. I've had unorthodox things. Remember, the FHA is only about 7 elements. There are a couple hundred elements that you can test for. Radon, what is it that is fuels, gasoline, what's the
Hydrocarbon.
hydrocarbon, or what was that?
VOCs.
Yes, VOCs, all that kind of stuff can be on there, and there are special test form, and they have to be drawn and tested in a special way, and sometimes special containers. I called John Wilson in the middle of the day at the inspection, and he says, no, I called him ahead of time because they told me they had that problem, and he had a cooler waiting for me with special containers in there. And then my client wanted to know questions, and I got John Wilson on the phone to talk to him. My client walked him through what to expect, and then turned around and have it tested. And guess what we found out it was? A dirty filter that had never been changed.
Oh, of course.
Because there was a gasoline skim on the toilets, on everything, and they
Yeah.
were all worried about petrochemicals and everything. And it wound up just being a dirty filter.
I got an odd, not an odd question, but they talked about, is there any methane gas in the water? And they don't test it over there, but what John told me to do is you fill up a 2-liter
Right,
bottle, and like 3/4 of a way, make it tight, and let it sit until it gets room temperature, so about 6-8 hours, you let it go. And then what you do is you take a lighter, right next to it, and carefully unscrew the cap. Because if there's methane, the methane will come out of the water and into that cavity, and it'll pressurize. And as you
So the 6 hours gets it up into the air cap.
yeah, exactly. And then when you start loosening the cap, the air will come through, and if the gas lights the flame, you get a blue, and you got methane gas.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So you make it a bomb.
Knowing how to do
No,
water.
don't say that word.
Knowing how to, we didn't hear that.
Methane gas in small spaces, how that flashes.
And certainly don't say anything like that while you're boarding an airplane. Water testing and having being comfortable with water testing is the most important thing you can do. Because don't let them think it's the first time through. If you're serious about going out there within the next 3 or 4 months and expecting, you're going to get busy. And when you do get busy, you start getting your first couple, and you wind up walking into a house that does have a well that you didn't expect it, and you don't have your bottles, and you aren't conversant on the way to set it up, then you're going to look like an idiot. And I know that this is something, this isn't heating systems, this isn't electrical, this isn't just something we're just filling up another hour with. This is going to make you look professional or non-professional, a rookie or not a rookie, by having your bottles ready. So get them, go in to Bender Laboratory, get some bottles. Certainly, maybe you don't have to go out and get them today, but the moment that you know you're going to start getting busy, a couple weeks ahead of time, get your bottles, go in and talk to John. Give me a call on the phone. Any of you drive by my house, let me know you're coming. I'll get the women out. Let me know you're coming. We'll walk into my bathroom and I'll show you how to do a well flow test. I'll take sample bottles and show you how to do that. But I can tell you now, but I assure every one of you that you won't remember what I said 3 months from now. So when you know it's coming up, call me. Okay, I've got the time. Okay? I think that's it for this chapter. Oh, city water. What's to know about city water? Notice the small paragraph it has on the last page. That's how important it is. City water is tested, city water runs. The only thing you need to know is what kind of pipes is it going through in the house. You need to know that on the well. But there's not much to do with city water. You find the meter and look at the condition of the pipes. When you're running water, it's under pressure, so if it's leaking, it's leaking. You'll know that.
So
There's just nothing to talk about city water other than go run your water to make sure you have a good supply, water pressure.
Dan, do you get a lot of people asking you to test it
Not a
because of
lot.
lead?
Not a lot, occasionally, but not often. I've been asked about 3 times, one for radon and 2 times for lead in the water. And I try and avoid the lead one because it's almost impossible to control.
Right.
Because now you gotta make sure that the people that live in the house don't use that faucet within 8 hours. So how do you do that? So I don't make much of an effort to try and, oh, you better test for lead, because now you're just opening up a can of worms.
Well, it's been in the news lately, you know, because of the funding that's been delved out, and now they're saying
One of the
this city's
schools,
gonna.
one of the local schools, they found lead was coming out of one of the faucets.
Yeah,
That was crazy.
yeah.
And then they did others, and none of the others in the whole building had it. Just one of the, not the faucets, but one of the coolers, you know, in the hallway,
Yeah,
water coolers. That was crazy.
yeah.
What, now we're supposed to go around and check every item or appliance for lead?
Every municipality has to do a water analysis at least annually and publish the results to.
Well, the problem with lead is it's done, it's not a naturally organic thing that's growing. It's got to come somewhere in the system, and it's going to come in the pipes. And the more likely place it'll come in the pipes is going to be in the house, because the cities have already done everything that they can to keep the lead out of the main piping. Now, you'll see lead pipes coming into the house, but they've tampered with the at the water municipality. They've kept the level of one of those, I forget which one it is, phosphates up high, so that it coats the inside of the pipe. So you have municipal water running through lead pipes into the house that has no lead in it. That's because they let the pH of the water, I'm using pH as an example, remain high for years and years, and then they lowered it. And while it did that, it caked the inside of those lead pipes, and now there's no lead seeping into the water. Syracuse is the only town that didn't do that. So Syracuse has no lead pipes. They changed every pipe out in the whole city. So the only town that there's no lead issue is in Syracuse, unless it's in the solder. But every place else, I found lead pipes in Albany. That picture in the book of a lead pipe is where it's lead coming in, and there's that bulb in the end. Anybody know why that bulb? The signature for a lead pipe is at where it meets the meter. There's going to be a big bulb.
That's a solder.
No,
Expansion, pressure expansion?
no. Structurally, it's sounder. They form it intentionally because a straight lead pipe will shatter too easy, but they found is that if they give the end of the pipe a spherical, it will withstand more pressure, and then it could be bonded on to the copper pipe going into the rest of the house. It's structurally stronger.
Well, it's close to the connection, so.
It's close to the connection, that's right, that was a good guess. But it's structurally sounder, so it can be bonded onto the other pipe. If they leave it going in straight, you can't tighten it on without crushing the pipe or something like that. Okay?
Have you run into PFOA?
No.
So there's no.
I've had a lot of people that want me to test for it when I was up north doing anything, but I called, I gave John Wilson, I said, listen, they're asking me about PFOAs, and he says, where's the house located? And I give him the street address, he go look it up on the map, he says, tell him not to worry. That's happened 3 times I agreed with John, he's the expert in it. If he tells me to tell them not to worry, I'm good with that. Plus, I don't want to go through the hassle. My client doesn't want the expense. So if John Wilson says it's okay, then it's okay. Okay, thank you very much, gentlemen.